Okay.
You started?
Yes, it did.
All right. So this meeting does not have enough people to meet quorum. So no official decisions are going to be being made during this meeting. It's just going to be us discussing some matters. Actually, never mind. Ethan is here. So we now have quorum.
Wonderful.
Sorry about that.
All good. So,
By the way, Ethan, this meeting is being recorded by Shadowplay. So,
Yep.
so
I didn't need to hit anything for that.
Huh?
I didn't need to hit any button for that.
no, it's recorded on their personal computer.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm using some NVIDIA software.
All right, so we have to get the meeting started. So first is introductions. I'm Kate. I am the president of NEAM, and Amber said she wants to see some discussions in regards to what we want to see from the organization. So one thing I would like to see from the organization is an effort towards distancing New England states from being economically and politically dependent on the federal government, because I believe that the federal government is unreliable and will inevitably cease to function in a useful way. And it's better for us to be prepared for that versus for it to happen suddenly and without warning.
Agreed. I'm Ethan. I'm the secretary. And I definitely agree with that. Something I'm personally looking for from the movement is more regional cooperation, specifically within New England, both for things like healthcare or for infrastructure and just general more assistance. There are already several interstate compacts that are specifically for New England and sometimes for New England and Canada specifically. And I really feel like we could expand that to cover more things. And the framework is there. We just need to work towards it.
Agreed. My name is Amber. I am the technical head interim as of now. And I pretty much could not word it better than Imnota. Like, yeah, pretty much exactly that.
All right.
When I was talking about introducing the org, I assumed that at least one or two people would show up, but that is not likely to be the case at the moment.
Yeah, I'll admit that's my fault. I had totally forgotten that Vulcan Trekkie had suggested today, and then he had forgotten that he had suggested today, and then a lot of our members are sick. There's a flu going around, and unfortunately, we are severely undermanned for the meeting.
It happens.
It's okay.
We can put together meetings at more consistent times, like X day on each month or something.
Agreed.
So that people don't have to remember each individual meeting date and time.
Another thing that I had been planning on doing was on establishing a calendar for the organization, which I already had, but I'm just going to switch the account so it's more easily accessed. And I was going to make it so all of the members, at least for the administration, can get updated in advance. It will give you alerts to remind you there's a meeting. And then, of course, it can be added for notes on like, make sure we do this thing on this day or by this day. And just kind of keep a general schedule. It helps. I got a meeting literally on the drive here and while I was or an alert while I was at work and while I was on the drive here to say, hey, you have a meeting, it's coming, don't forget about it. So I think that'd be very helpful. And then also, Mnota had mentioned the that we should schedule meetings at the conclusion of this one because we had discussed doing a meeting at the middle of the month and at the end of the month for every month going forward, unless there was an unexpected emergency or something had come up, which hopefully we can work towards.
So for the sake of time and making sure we don't go over, we should save any discussions for the end when there would normally be questions, since there's probably not going to be any.
Sure.
All right, so let's move on to the next discussion, which is the Radio Free New England. Ethan or Amber, have any of you heard more about that since we discussed it?
I'm
So-
not. I just want to say that I'm not on that.
Yeah, I talked to Imperial, and he said that he was going to look into transferring the rights and what needed to be done. And I gave him the information for our administration account on if we needed to create a new Spotify account to do that. And then also if we needed to draw up legal paperwork to basically prevent anyone else from stealing the name after we use it. Hello. Welcome to the
Alright.
meeting. Just so you know, this is a recorded meeting. So
If that doesn't
that
jive,
bothers you.
we can just leave and we will be posting this later. But welcome to the meeting.
Yes.
All right, so just to
sorry,
summarize
so
for
about-
people who might be watching this later down the line, we are planning to get a Spotify account for creating podcasts, and that is going to be called Radio Free New England. We are just in the process of acquiring the name from someone else. And also, part of the agenda was discussing a digital blog or newspaper. You mentioned a name that you might be interested in.
Yes, it was originally it was going to be an existing newspaper that had since been phased out, but we've went with something else. We were thinking Freedom's Herald,
Okay,
because that kind of sums up the movement.
sounds
pretty
good.
well.
So that currently is just kind of in the rough draft stage. We're just kind of piecing it together. We haven't established any solid plans yet, right?
So the part of the media committee was looking into what would be needed to run a newspaper. She was a former journalist, and then also if she could get any contacts that she was familiar with to help work on the newspaper itself. And then for Radio Free New England, we were hoping to kind of mirror their broadcast to go with the newspaper. So one of our members had offered to be the host for the radio station. And then, once a month, we would also release the newspaper. And then as we get more engagement, we would increase the releases for the newspaper to be a little bit more frequent and get more involvement from the community itself. But that's where we're at right now.
Okay, sounds like progress. We'll check up on that probably within another month or so. So next is moving on to the next topic, which is basically a review of current projects going on within the org. So youth outreach programs and stuff like that.
Right. So one of our members, two of our members are involved with a youth outreach program in Connecticut, and they were hoping to expand that through us and through the existing group that they were with to cover not only youth problems, but problems going on locally, which was causing the youth to go towards either crime or drugs or mental health problems. So they thought that solving social justice issues, political issues, infrastructure were all things that needed to be addressed, and they were going to try and work with us on that. We had also discussed working with unions in an upcoming campaign, which we're getting more information on soon, hopefully. And then we were hoping to do interviews with unions at the conclusion of the campaign, as they're fairly busy right now and would likely be unable to meet with us. But we do have a contact within the unions who we're working with closely. Another project we're working on is state resources, to make sure all of the state resources and local resources for people that are disabled or low income, or they're veterans, or are underprivileged, also for new mothers, but basically people who need support would know how to access it. And specifically for homeless people or people who have nowhere else to go, rather than the police just kind of shuffling them around or even arresting them in cases like Brockton in Massachusetts, or there are a couple other towns where actually staying overnight is now a crime, or at least they're working towards that. We are hoping for the police to have an option to say, these are all the open beds in the area. You know, you can get a ride through this service. It's covered, it's protected, rather than arresting them. So basically, working with the police and local city councils and different groups in the area to help provide services both for underprivileged and people in need, and also to reduce load for the cities themselves.
Excellent. And one last project I think we're working on, I'm not sure if it's still being worked on, was also the rail project as well, correct?
Yes, it is still being worked on. There was also the app project to merge with the state resources. But for the railroads, basically what happened is we were using a population map created by the EU, the European Union, for New England, and finding high population areas and high density areas that coincided with abandoned rails or existing rails, and that we could merge with either abandoned rails or create new ones. Unfortunately, the map crashed and the data was not something we could use. So they were changing to a separate map and going to populate that and attempt to basically collate it. We also got some data from the MBTA for Boston and for the surrounding areas. And then we had some Then we also had some material from Rhode Island and I believe Connecticut that we were hoping to merge with the existing data that they had collected previously. But there's no updates beyond they're still working on identifying high population zones that coincide with abandoned rails and for possibilities for new rails.
Excellent. And for anyone who might be watching this who isn't familiar with this project, the end goal is essentially to increase public transportation systems within New England as a whole. That's the end goal. So part of that
and cargo transportation.
Yes, and cargo transportation. So that's why we are looking at rail systems within the area. Okay, so next topic is something you touched on a bit, which was the unions. You mentioned that we were in contact with a group that is beginning a project involving unions. So to emphasize for people who would be watching this, one of the goals of the organization is to work with unions to push for ballot initiatives that would move New England towards a more self-sustaining system. So instead of relying on the federal government for federal programs and like federal agencies and stuff like that, we want to move towards the states supplying those services, so that when the federal government essentially stops being reliable for those things, we will still have them. So part of that is what Ethan was talking about, was the there is a current initiative from unions within our local area. I believe it's just Massachusetts right now, or is it other states as well?
No, it's other states as well in New England, but it is primarily in Massachusetts. Basically, it was for AI protections, film casting, and I believe the Writers Guild. I would have to review the notes we have on that, but I'm pretty sure it was AI protections and film casting. Basically, they want to increase workers' rights here because several states are trying to encroach on that specifically. And then after we establish that relationship a little bit more closely, we were hoping to capitalize on that with interviews and then with working directly with the unions if we can get their buy-in for lobbying for more workers' rights and basically things that we want as a common goal. So one of them was increasing the or replacing the National Labor Board with something on a local level. So like a state labor board handling not only federal contracts or interstate contracts, but also local contracts. So currently it's only protecting interstate contracts. So the hope is to expand it to cover more, as was done in, I believe, New Hampshire, and then also to increase workers' rights, obviously, as that's always a hope, and protections, because part of not only Project 2025, but the GOP playbook, at least going forward, seems to be to target unions specifically, and also to possibly reverse their legality. So in a couple instances, they're actually suing the suing, or private companies are also suing with the support of the GOP for uh, it was, if I recall, questioning the legality of unions as a whole, and seeing if they could even exist or operate in those states, because a lot of states are looking to make it as basically an optional thing on whether states are legal in that particular zone where it is federally protected currently.
Thank you. So yeah, that's super important. I'm glad to be working with them and hoping we can make progress towards securing workers' rights in our region, because that is super important. And I do not trust the federal government at all to keep us and our workers safe. Moving on to the next topic. This involves our filing status with the state, and also discussions of donations. So in regards to the filings with the state, we have finished certifying the organization. It officially exists within the Massachusetts registry. We are just in the process of getting our tax exemption from the IRS, which we need to raise $650 in funding for. So up to this point, we have been putting that off because we needed to get a bank account set up in order to have the funds be transferred there. And that has finished today. So currently, I still don't have the bank account information because that's going to be emailed to me. They were finishing filing the paperwork when I went in today. So they're going to email that to me later. But the bank account does exist. I put money into it already, so it is active.
So basically, to sum that up, we're registered on the state level, and to receive tax exempt status and to be fully recognized as a nonprofit federally, the IRS needs to receive more money so we can file certain forms. We have been paying out of pocket, and we haven't been asking for donations up until this point. We are also not expecting to accept dues until April, so we're holding off on all collections until all members of the state committees and the executive, which is us, is formed, because we want to give an unbiased vote. So because of that, we have no funds coming in from any of the members or community, which we hope to seek soon to help provide the rest of these and really get the ground rolling on our objectives. Unfortunately, as I said, it is rather high. It is $650. We are looking at other ways to create revenue. We have a couple projects that we're looking at to do so, but any help is appreciated.
Thank you. So yeah, that pretty much covers everything in that topic. We will inform everyone once the donations are up and running and start asking for them. The next part is to essentially officially incorporate Amber as the technical department head. So there hasn't been a vote for this. It's kind of been an unofficial position currently because she has been filling the role, or they have been filling the role. But we do kind of need an official vote. So we do have quorum because you're here. Amanda
Yes,
isn't here,
so
but we only need half.
Amanda, the treasurer, is not currently available. She is sick. But even without her, we still have a majority vote.
Yep.
And I'm assuming you vote yes. I also
Of
vote
course.
yes.
I vote yes.
So you are officially the department supervisor, department head for the technical committee. Thank you so much, Amber, for your service and your continued service, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for your trust, and I will do my best.
Alrighty.
Just to touch upon that really quickly, Amber completely revised the Discord server. She merged all of our channels. She's made things a lot more efficient. She's done a lot of work for us in the short time she's been with us, and it's been a very helpful, very incredible experience to have with us.
Thank you.
All right. So, in regards to the agenda, that was actually pretty much everything.
Yeah,
this
so
would
we're open
normally
to
be when we,
questions.
yeah, this would normally be we would take questions and answer them, since this is supposed to be more of a forum. So if
Well, there is someone here. Should you have
yeah,
questions,
so if you want to
I'll
ask a
open up
question,
the chat section in case you want to type instead of say anything verbally. But do you have any questions? Do you have anything that you want to ask us? We do have about a half hour that we can put towards this. Or sorry, yeah, half hour.
We'll just wait a minute in case
Of course.
any chats show up.
Okay, of course. No problem. They said they have no questions, but they appreciate us asking.
that is perfectly fine. So, in that case, is there anything else anyone wants to discuss or bring up?
Yeah, so just to circle back to the publications, we have the software required to create a newspaper already. I've already acquired it, and we have someone that has journalist experience, and like sorry, words are tricky sometimes. So we have someone with journalistic experience and experience using the programs. Hopefully they'll agree to be the editor, but I have not gotten confirmation from that yet. But at the very least, we have someone that's agreed to write articles for us. So that should be up soon. We just need to look into acquiring and protecting the rights to the name that we're establishing for the newspaper. It would be entirely digital to save money because last time I checked, which was this morning, it would be $1,000 for every 500 newspapers we print in New England.
Yeah, having a newspaper
Which
is
is not
incredibly
feasible.
expensive.
Yeah, it's just not feasible. But a digital one that's much more reasonable. I know it may seem kind of silly to go with a blog and a podcast rather than like a radio show, but we have to look into things economically. So that's why we're going with that route specifically. But we do want to hear from everyone so that you can submit articles, you can submit requests, things you want to cover, things you want to see. This is to cover all of New England, things that affect New England, and policy procedures, op-eds, whatever we can, you know? So it's to cover a lot of things and give a voice to our movement, both within the region and internationally, for what we're looking for, what we're trying to seek for our message.
Well said. One thing I would like to bring up just very quickly is that currently a lot of people in our organization are not able to get email addresses that are specific to the organization. They essentially have to create their own personal emails and kind of unofficially associate it with the organization. Once we have officially registered our tax exempt status with the federal government, we will be getting a Google Workspace, and we'll be having much more official communications with official organization emails.
To also include in that, Google Workspace also comes with shared storage, unlimited video calls for up to, I think, 500 people at a time, and basically other things that help us run the organization and company. There are a lot of individual things we're hoping to do, not only to create revenue for the organization to carry out what we're looking to do with creating individual companies, ballot questions, outreach. All of these things cost money, unfortunately. So all of these things need to be done efficiently. And right now we're kind of just doing this all with our own personal equipment, our own money, and it's limited. So hopefully we can get Google Workspace to kind of unify everything, give everyone an equal playing field, equal access to materials, equipment, and it's virtual, so it would always be accessed or accessible by all of our team. Nota or Kate, I was hoping you could also touch upon the core goals of the movement as discussed in the organization's legal documents, just because we have some time and I don't think enough people really understand or have read into what the goal or objective is.
Sure. So I'm sure everyone who joins this organization has their own goals and ambitions in regards to where they want to see this movement go and what they want to get out of it. But generally, when I started the organization, my primary goal was an organization that will push for more of an economic and politically independent New England. I strongly believe in the idea that there is a fairly large cultural divide between New England and the rest of the US, which you can often see in voting maps. You can see that there is a very clear border. And my hope is that using an organization that isn't necessarily tied to like the same restrictions as like a political party, for instance, we would be able to achieve more than we would otherwise. We can invest money in places where we would otherwise not be able to. We can take donations that we otherwise would not be able to. And the hope is that over the coming years, we can be kind of the people on the front line pushing for things that will eventually become a lot more popular as people start to see how important it is for our regional autonomy to increase. Because over the coming 4 years, there's definitely going to be a lot of people in our region that feel neglected, feel abused, feel unheard, and they are going to want something to help them. And the only thing that's going to be there is the states in our region. And so I guarantee that our movement is going to become much bigger and we're going to see more organizations like ours popping up over time. So we definitely want to be kind of the first ones in and giving like an idea on how it should go. I want to be our organization to be what other organizations end up looking at as like the golden standard for how to move forward with New England autonomy and incorporating more independence in the way we operate in our region.
So to touch upon that independence specifically, part of the movement goals is also to create independent state committees, which we touched upon very briefly earlier, so that each state and each committee has their own voice and own autonomy within the movement itself to kind of really touch down and focus on what affects Massachusetts or what affects Connecticut or Rhode Island. As we grow, this will be a lot easier. And we have been growing exponentially. We started with 2 members in November 29th, and it's January 10th, and we have almost 550 members between Discord and Reddit. Actually, no, I'm sorry. We have 570 members as of Discord and Reddit. So we're growing very quickly, you know. And for qualifications for the state committees, you just have to be over 18, agree to work 7 hours a week for the movement over any period of time. So either all at once, divided over an hour a day, or you know, in groups of whatever you want. And you just have to be willing to appear for meetings, which would be scheduled ideally with more advance notice than this. I'll admit a lot of this was last minute decided because we had forgotten that it was scheduled for today, and that was on me for not reminding everyone. But so I know 7 hours seems like a lot and it seems like a big commitment, but really that doesn't have to be you talking to everyone for 7 hours, or you reaching out to everyone or anything like that. 7 hours over 7 days is really, at a minimum, you reviewing PR campaigns, or you reviewing messages from other people or other members, reviewing projects, or even just seeing if anything popped up on Discord or Reddit to see if there's been any updates. We've been getting some emails lately from interested people and members of the community. So, those are the kind of things that you'd be doing. You wouldn't necessarily have to be constantly working. You just have to be committing yourself to the movement for that amount of time. Another thing is you get a voice as part of like an inner council, so to speak. So every committee has a voice for amendments and for changes that happen to the organization as a whole, because if for an amendment to occur, there has to be a popular vote within within a committee, and then that triggers a vote for the all committees combined, which is the executive, the state committees, all of them together, and then that will allow for an amendment to occur. So if you want to see change, or if you want to see something happen, not only do you have a voice on a local level, but you also have a voice on a regional level, which is with the full movement. But so we try to give autonomy not only to the entire organization, but also to the states that we serve.
Yes, and just to add a little bit more detail, and there isn't much to add because that was very thorough, but one of the primary kind of driving forces of our organization structure is decentralization. So we strongly believe that as much as possible, we want things to be done at a local level, basically grassroots. But of course, it's impossible to do grassroots when you're a small organization. We just don't have the manpower yet. But the hope is that more people will join us. And as more people come, they will get involved in state committees. And then eventually they'll get involved on county levels and then eventually local levels. And we can have a very strong presence in as many places as possible. If we can impact local elections, we can impact things like zoning laws, for instance, that could help impact the housing crisis throughout New England. We can impact other things such as implementing housing regulations for people who rent out properties, which can also be done on local levels. So having local activity and local activism is extremely important, and it is one of the things we are going to be striving for as we grow. This isn't just going to be an organization where the executive committee makes all the decisions and everything that happens is done by us. The end goal is that a lot of the things that should be getting done by the everyday people within their local towns and cities and municipalities. And then
100%.
Yes. So that's a very important thing to understand about the structure of our organization.
Another thing I think we should touch upon is the goal to create not only businesses, but to establish working committees. But businesses are a big aspect because we understand that economically, a lot of the things in New England that made New England strong even just a couple decades ago are simply no longer here. The manufacturing's been reduced. We don't have enough agriculture to support New England. You know, Okay, another perfect example is with the fear of the bird influenza that's coming. If they do, if it does come here and there's a large swath of chickens dying or birds dying, can we feed New England? And the answer is no, we can't. So we have to import all of our food from other states or other regions, and that drives up prices and it makes it harder for people to really survive here. A lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. A lot of people can't make this work. So we need to look at things long term, even if it's not affecting us right away. And that's a big thing with the creating the businesses is we're hoping to establish things that are not only profitable but are helpful for New England and to make New England more self-sufficient. And then with the working committees, we again are trying to make things not entirely run by the executive committee. We want individual people to have a voice and a say. You know, for every single project that we're working on, someone suggested it from the community. We didn't just go, oh, I like railroads today. It was someone said, we need to work on this. This is something we have in the area. It can help us. And we listened and we said, okay, here's the space to do it. So don't feel like just because you're someone far away or you're behind a computer or you don't have a lot of time doesn't mean you can't contribute to the movement with your advice, with your words, or with your mental contributions. If you have the time, we were always grateful to have more volunteers, more help. Don't feel like you can't participate. There's no requirements, no anything, just a willingness to help New England, to help us grow.
And to go back to the having local companies, but having local companies also means that citizens of New England have more buying power, so we can better hold companies to account, and that will hopefully protect our environment and our wallets and a bunch of other stuff.
And with what Imnota mentioned, or Kate, I'm sorry, I'm going to just say Kate. What Kate had mentioned was for the residential things, for making it easier to rent out space on your property, like for tiny homes or for in-law apartments. Massachusetts has recently made it so it's legal and a right of every citizen of Massachusetts that owns property has the right to build a in-law apartment on their property now, assuming it doesn't conflict with local zoning laws. A lot of towns and cities do not allow you to build based on space requirements. So even though it's legal within the entire state, it's not legal locally. So you would need to work with your local representatives, your city council members to try and revise that, which is something you can do with your fellow members here. You know, find people within your community, find people within your county, and push for these changes. People specifically for housing see that there's a lot of issues with out of state people buying or investing in single family homes who don't need them, don't live in them, or corporations or people who want to sell them to make a profit. So if you believe, as some politicians have suggested, that we should make it so foreign entities and corporations can't buy single family homes to stop inflating the market, then that's something we should talk to our representatives about. That's something we should do and can do through this movement. You know, there are a lot of changes that need to be done in New England. Not everything we can tackle at once. But if you have suggestions, if there's things that you think or know we need to do, then bring them up. Because otherwise, we can't handle them, we can't address them, or we won't know about them. But there's a lot of room for change here. And I think there's a lot of potential to help New England, even in the short term. Everyone needs a place to live. Everyone needs something to eat. Everyone needs heat in the winter. So through the resources that we're collating, we're hoping to make it so that everyone can find those things. In Massachusetts, not we do have a right to shelter, but there's also a priority put on local residents. So there's a lot of propaganda around immigrants taking, housings for homeless people, but every person I've talked to, at least for government officials and for local people that have needed it, Massachusetts is one of the easiest ways and one of the easiest places to get care and support for food, for housing. If people feel like Massachusetts is the best and it's still difficult or still a struggle for some people, then that's something that we should look at for the rest of the region. I know recently it was said Rhode Island has one of the highest homelessness populations in the entire union, and Maine is like number 3. So, as a whole, as a region, there are definitely some things we need to really be concerned about and that we can address through ballot initiatives and through talking with our representatives, through talking with your city council members. Change won't happen if we don't make that effort and put in that time.
To add one last thing to that, in regards to one of the major issues that kind of plagues New England in particular is that we are a very developed region. And as a response to that high development, we also have a very high cost of living, and wages tend not to increase at the same rate that cost of living increases. One of the ways that we want to fix that is by not just helping create businesses, but helping create cooperatives, because cooperatives have the unique benefit that if you are a worker in a business, you own part of that business. You get a vote in what the wages are. You get to decide who the person in charge is. And that allows workers to have the power to essentially barter for much better wages without having to go through incredibly long drawn out processes like protests or strikes or the types of things that unions have to go through. We are very pro union, but we are also pro cooperative, because it essentially gives you all of the privileges that unions get, but without having to go through all the struggles that unions inevitably have to go through in order to get those rights.
Yeah, so for a cooperative, it's essentially a union operated. Think of it as a union operated business. They're collectively owning or collectively working together for the business. They all have a voice. They all have a say. It's not like the owner has to negotiate with the union. It's because they're all one group, one member, one cooperative.
Exactly.
And then the last thing I'd like to touch upon is, oh, I didn't know that. Ocean Spray is one of the largest co-ops on the planet and is New England owned,
That
according
is
to
super cool. I didn't
Hydro.
know that.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Thank you, Hydro. But one of the last things I want to touch upon, and I do agree, I think co-ops are really one of the best ways forward to establish strong pay, strong workers' rights for New England, is two things. One, in Massachusetts, they recently created I believe it's the wage equity or wage transparency law, so that going into effect within the next couple of months, all positions within Massachusetts must disclose the pay range and what they offer for all employees within the company. I believe it's if you have over 10 employees. So now there's transparency between what people are paying, what people are making, and people will have to adjust pay accordingly to be competitive or to retain their workers, essentially. And the other thing is, and I've mentioned this in Reddit and a little bit in Discord, but for anyone that hasn't seen it, New Hampshire had proposed a regional-based single-payer healthcare program. So essentially what it is single-payer healthcare, but spread out across any state that wanted to join, which is ideally all New England states, which is likely the easiest way to balance costs as ironically, the more people involved, the less pay it's required for each individual person. I won't get into this too much, but basically mass care, and there are various other groups, but mass care is the most prominent that I'm aware of, is proposing single payer healthcare as a ballot question. So, if you really believe in single payer healthcare, medical debt is higher than housing debt in New England. It's the highest debt form for the entirety of New England is medical debt, and then housing is number two. So that's something I believe personally very strongly that we need to tackle, and college debt. So it's college debt, medical debt, and housing debt. But all that aside, mass care is available and pushing for a ballot initiative on the county level, which they're then going to go for the state level. And then if that is successful, I'm hoping we can help and join them to push for that on a regional level. As I said, with New Hampshire, they had attempted that unsuccessfully, unfortunately. But if we are able to do that, I think that would help New England, help our states, and make it significantly easier for the cost of living for the average person. I think we really, really need to look into ways, even if it's not something we can tackle right away, we need to look into ways to make it easier for the average person to afford to live. Because right now, most people can't. They live paycheck to paycheck, and more companies are closing every day. I know Walgreens is closing. I want to say a quarter of their stores in the US. CVS is closing stores. I know Taco Bell is closing stores. All these retail chains are closing stores, particularly in Massachusetts and New England, because they can't afford them anymore. And then, unfortunately, with the upcoming administration and tariffs, they likely will have to likely be forced to close more to keep the same overhead. And then with the reduced immigration, I'm not saying we should advocate for slave workers or for poorly paid workers, like through, if anyone's been paying attention to the H-1B visa discussions, of basically paying people nothing or almost nothing because they can. I'm not advocating for that, but I am acknowledging that without them being there, companies will close. So you need to be prepared for reduced jobs within New England and unemployment rising. So that is something we're going to need to consider going forward. But to be clear, I'm not saying we should advocate for or encourage low paid workers, just something that we need to keep in mind existing within the region and will no longer going forward, most likely.
That touches on a very complex topic, actually, which is that as things get more expensive and people start buying less things, companies make less money. So companies are hurt by things getting expensive just as much as everyday people are, because if people aren't buying as much because they can't afford as much, companies aren't making as much. However, that's probably a topic better for the podcast.
Yeah,
You
right.
could go,
Sorry.
I was going to say,
you could go into that for
let's
hours.
keep it moving.
Yeah, I mean, I figured we're wrapping up in like 10 minutes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I didn't think we had anything left on the agenda. My apologies.
There's one last thing, which is
just-
I'm sorry, Amber.
Future meetings. Obviously, I'm not going to say we should commit to a date and time at the moment, but we agreed to move towards a more structured meeting schedule, say
Yes.
day of a month, and have our meetings every month on that day at that time. We all agree to that? Yes.
Yeah,
right. I agree.
We should set at least the next two meetings.
If you don't mind, I'll just open my work schedule in the other tab.
Yeah, we don't want what happened this time to happen, where it's like 3 days prior to the event is when it gets set up.
And as I said previously, I will update the calendar in the future.
Okay.
So that
I will make sure that the website is updated with whatever our next meeting is.
Also, Amber and Kate, So for the calendar for Google, it's a little weird, and we need to write a script for it. And I know both of you are fairly good with that. So if you can write a script, that would be appreciated. But I'll touch on that later after the meeting.
Okay.
But let me sign in on this really quick.
Hydro, do you have any questions? Or are you good?
You have to check the chat to see him.
I have the chat
Or her.
open.
Oh, thank you. Of course, I'm going to turn on my phone for this. Sorry. Just bear with me.
Also, I just want to say, feel free to spread a link to this video. We'll probably have it up on Google Drive or some other storage. So spread it to whoever might be interested. I think it has a lot of good information and describes our organization pretty well and touches upon a lot of the problems that New England is currently facing. So,
Of course. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. You know, anyone that's interested, please share. I try to reach out to as many groups that seem interested in our cause or seem displeased with the current administration, union, or healthcare system, or any of the existing political parties are dissatisfied. You know, I think there's a lot of potential for change and a lot of things that we support for New England that could be helpful for anyone listening.
and sharing links to the website, links to these videos is a very low effort way to really help our cause.
Hold on. 644-623. Sorry, my phone was restarting this whole time. Okay, let's see.
If we're looking at meetings, then we can probably get a date and time just over the next couple of weeks, especially if
I was thinking in about 2 weeks. That sound good for everyone?
yeah, a
I
lot.
gotta
Yeah,
actually
that
look at like
sounds
a
fine. The 26th won't work, obviously.
right. But so 14 days from today, that would be
That'd be the 24th.
okay. So I could do the 23rd, or I could do the 28th, personally.
I can do either. Amber, which one works better for you?
23rd or 28th,
Yeah.
Mhm.
either of them
Anytime,
is fine.
anytime.
Um, I say we do the 28th then. That way it's after when we have that communication with the lawyer, so we can bring that up at the next meeting.
Agreed.
And for context, we're just talking with a lawyer who seemed interested in the cause and seemed interested in helping us out.
Specifically with ballot questions and with advocating on the political side of things, which hopefully will be fruitful. And it seemed very good. They had prior experience advocating for those things within New England. And like I said, hopefully it's successful.
And of course, we thank them for their interest and their time and their advice and expertise.
Of course. But so the 28th, and we can touch upon exact times a little closer on if you guys want night or day. I would assume
Usually prefer
night.
afternoons or night.
I would assume night because it's a Tuesday, so you'd want to wait till people are out of work. But that is up to you.
I have no preference.
I prefer
Then
nights.
then I would say nights, just because it would get more involvement or capability of involvement, because people aren't going to watch when they're at work.
Sounds good. In regards to the time, we should probably set that up not too soon to the day. That way people can be, so we
Right.
don't end up
I'll
doing what we
put
did
a-
today
I'll
where
put
we
a-
post it like
I'll
15
put a
minutes.
1 week Right. That. Well, hey, I posted it on Discord 24 hours prior, but it was midnight and I was tired. However, that's okay. My fault. I
We're
will be
still
better about that.
getting used to this whole
Yeah, it's all
to this
good.
whole thing.
Right, right. And at least a couple of our members, myself included, work full-time jobs on top of this. So like for me in particular, I've been working like 90 hours between the two and pulling a lot of really late nights. So I've been a little tired. I know Spencer's been putting in some time with this too, on top of his full-time job, and a couple other members, Amanda as well. So it's a little hard sometimes to get everything smoothly. But so what I was going to say is I will put in a 1 week reminder in advance to set a time, and I will link all of you to that calendar once I move it over to the administrator account, which I'll do tonight. I have to drive over to work to go help that cashier close, and then I'm going to come back and go wrap this up.
All right, sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right, I hope you guys have a good night. Thank you so much for the meeting, and I look forward to the next one.
All right.
Wonderful.
Have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Good night.